This is Land of Havilah, Jeremiah 25. It's a new prophecy, verse 1. The word that came to Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim the son of Josiah, king of Judah, the same was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, which Jeremiah the prophet spoke to all the people of Judah and to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Comment: Yahweh delivered the prophecy of the figs to Jeremiah in the last chapter when Zedekiah was king. Now we've gone backward in time to the reign of Jehoiakim. In verse 1, the year of this prophecy turns out to be 605 BC, which is at least 8 years before the prophecy of the figs. The situation in 605 was that Nebuchadnezzar had just been crowned king of Babylon, and he had just defeated the king of Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish. Carchemish was about 350 miles north of Judah on the Euphrates River. After the victory, Nebuchadnezzar came south and quickly subjugated all the small kingdoms, including Judah, with little or no resistance. We've been calling that the first siege of Jerusalem, and we'll keep calling it that, but Jehoiakim surrendered so quickly it's debatable whether there was a siege. Nebuchadnezzar took a few captives at that time, such as Daniel and his friends, Daniel chapter 1. But it was nothing like the 10,000 he took after the second siege in 597, and nothing like the wholesale captivity he took away in 586. So Nebuchadnezzar came 3 times over a period of 19 years, and each time it was worse because Judah wouldn't listen to Yahweh. But back to this chapter, in verse 2, in the year 605, while things were still relatively quiet in Judah, Jeremiah spoke to the people and said, verse 3, From the 13th year of Josiah the son of Ammon, king of Judah, even to this day, these 23 years, Yahweh's word has come to me, and I've spoken to you, rising up early and speaking, but you have not listened. Comment in verse 3, Jeremiah says, I've been delivering Yahweh's word to you for 23 years, and you haven't listened. He says, verse 4, Yahweh has sent to you all his servants the prophets, rising up early and sending them, but you've not listened or inclined ear to heart, saying, Return now everyone from his evil way and from the evil of your doings, and dwell in the land that Yahweh has given to you and to your fathers from of old and even forevermore. Don't go after other gods to serve them or worship them, and don't provoke me to anger with the work of your hands, then I'll do you no harm. Yet you've not listened to me, says Yahweh, that you may provoke me to anger with the work of your hands, to your own hurt. Comment in verse 4, Jeremiah wasn't the only true prophet of his time. Yahweh's been sending, quote, all his servants, the prophets, end quote. In verses 5 and 6, the prophets have been telling Judah and Jerusalem, Return to Yahweh, repent, and you'll keep dwelling in this promised land forever. Put away your foreign gods, and Yahweh will do you no harm. Verse 8. Therefore Yahweh of armies says, Because you've not heard my words, behold, I'll send and take all the families of the north, says Yahweh, and I'll send to Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, my servant, and will bring them against this land and against its inhabitants and against all these nations around. I'll utterly destroy them and make them an astonishment and a hissing and perpetual desolations. Moreover, I'll take from them the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom and the voice of the bride, the sound of the millstones and the light of the lamp. This whole land will be a desolation and an astonishment, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Comment in verses 8 to 10, Yahweh says, Because you and the surrounding nations haven't listened to me, I'll completely and utterly destroy you and those nations by sending Nebuchadnezzar against you. In verse 11, the destruction will be astonishing. And in verse 11, a very important line, quote, These nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years, end quote. Putting the dates together, according to our modern historians, Judah and the surrounding nations started serving Nebuchadnezzar in 605. That would be the starting point of service to Babylon. And Cyrus the Great conquered the Babylonian kingdom in 539. That would be the stopping point of service to the king of Babylon. So by those dates, Judah and the surrounding nations served Babylon 66 years. That calculation puts us close to 70 years, but not right on it. So somehow the calculation is off by 4 years. By faith, your narrator knows Yahweh was exact and exactly calling the correct length of time of 70 years, and the error must be one of our own. Anyway, 605 and 539 are pretty close to the start and stop dates Yahweh had in mind in terms of service to the king of Babylon for 70 years. Yahweh goes on, verse 12, "It will happen when 70 years are accomplished that I'll punish the king of Babylon and that nation, says Yahweh, for their iniquity. I'll make the land of the Chaldeans desolate forever." Comment in verse 12, after 70 years, Yahweh will punish the king of Babylon and that nation being Babylon. Yahweh fulfilled it in 539 when the Medes and Persians captured Babylon the city, killed the Babylonian king, Daniel 5:30, and put an end to the Babylonian kingdom. Chaldeans in verse 12 are the ethnic group from lower Mesopotamia that were at the forefront of the Babylonian kingdom. Also in verse 12, Yahweh said he would make the Chaldeans' land desolate forever. He didn't say the land would be desolate immediately. In fact, it took Babylon the city about 500 years to decline until it turned into a ghost town. Today, the prophecy in verse 12 of permanent desolation of that area is still fulfilled. Babylon the city is only an archaeological site, and the surrounding land, the land of the Chaldeans, is a sparsely populated desert. Chalk another one up for Yahweh. Still regarding Babylon and the surrounding area, the land of the Chaldeans, Yahweh says, verse 13, "I'll bring on that land all my words which I've pronounced against it, even all that's written in this book, which Jeremiah has prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings will make bondservants of them, even of them. I'll recompense them according to their deeds and according to the work of their hands." Comment in verse 13, Yahweh refers to a book in which Jeremiah prophesied against Babylon and all the nations. Clearly, Yahweh knew Jeremiah's prophecies will be compiled into this book of Jeremiah. In verse 13, Yahweh has in mind Jeremiah chapters 25, this chapter, and chapters 46 to 51, which is where we find his prophecies against Babylon and all the nations. In verse 14, Yahweh's pronunciation against Babylon and all the nations is that many nations and kings will make bondservants of them. The fulfillment was that the Medes and Persians conquered the Babylonian kingdom and took full control of all the Middle East. Then the Macedonians under Alexander the Great took control of the Middle East, then the Romans, and so on through history. There was one foreign subjugation after another for over 1,200 years in the Middle East, until native Middle Easterners finally regained control of their own land in the 600s AD. So Yahweh was correct about many nations making bondservants of them. So far in the chapter, Judah doesn't listen, therefore Yahweh will make them a desolation by the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon will also devastate the nations surrounding Judah. After 70 years, Babylon will fall, but many other nations will step in and keep subjugating the Middle East. Going on, the rest of the chapter continues the theme of Yahweh's wrath against the nations, but there's an expansion of the theme such that his wrath will go out to all the nations on the surface of the earth. So Yahweh is using the ancient geopolitics of Jeremiah's time as a jumping-off point to describe the great and terrible day of the Lord, when Jesus returns in power and glory to strike the nations in his wrath. Revelation 19:15, Isaiah 63, 1-6, Psalm 2:9, Isaiah 13, 6-12, and Obadiah 1, 15 and 16. Not one nation will escape the tumult of what's about to happen in the Middle East over the next several hundred years. It's the tumult of Yahweh against them, and Yahweh's same wrath will go out to all the nations in the end times. Jeremiah says, verse 15, "For Yahweh, the God of Israel, says to me, Take this cup of the wine of wrath from my hand, and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. They will drink and reel back and forth and be insane because of the sword that I'll send among them. Then I took the cup at Yahweh's hand and made all the nations to drink to whom Yahweh had sent me, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah with its kings and its princes, to make them a desolation and astonishment, a hissing and a curse, as it is today, Pharaoh king of Egypt with his servants, his princes, and all his people, and all the mixed people, and all the kings of the land of Uz, all the kings of the Philistines, Ashkelon, Gaza, Ekron, and the remnant of Ashdod, Edom, Moab, and the children of Ammon, and all the kings of Tyre, all the kings of Sidon, and the kings of the isle which is beyond the sea, Dedan, Tema, Buz, and all who have their corners of the beard cut off, and all the kings of Arabia, all the kings of the mixed people who dwell in the wilderness, and all the kings of Zimri, all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of the Medes, and all the kings of the north far and near, one with another, and all the kingdoms of the world which are on the surface of the earth. The king of Shishak will drink after them. Comment in verses 15 to 17, Jeremiah had a vision of Yahweh handing him a cup filled with the wine of Yahweh's wrath. In verse 15, Jeremiah shall make the nations drink from it. In verse 16, the contents will drive the nations insane. It'll make them think about their coming destruction. In verse 18, by the time the Babylonians get done with Judah, Judah will be a picture of the astonishing global desolation of the end times. The same goes for the rest of the nations in verses 19 to 26. It's a list of virtually all known nations, plus the remote, nameless, unknown nations, such as the isle beyond the sea in verse 22, and in verse 26, the nations of the kings of the north, far and near, and all the kingdoms on the surface of the earth. Babylon won't destroy all these, but Yahweh will in end times. In verse 26, the king of Shishak will drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath after the rest of the nations. Shishak is a code word for Babylon, Jeremiah 51:41. This is according to a specific coding system called the Atbash cipher. It substitutes the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet for the first, the next to last letter for the second, and so on. Like all coding systems, it was for the purpose of relaying secret messages. In fulfillment of verse 26, the nations would drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath at the hands of Babylon in Jeremiah's time, and finally Babylon would drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath in Daniel's time 70 years later. In the interpretation as it applies to the end times, the nations will drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath in the tribulation. Mystery Babylon will drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath as one of the final events of the tribulation, Revelation 18. And when the Lord returns, he'll strike all the nations with the sword of his mouth and tread the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of God, Revelation 19:15. Jeremiah is to tell the nations, verse 27. You shall tell them, Yahweh of armies, the God of Israel, says, drink and be drunk, vomit, fall, and rise no more, because of the sword which I'll send among you. It shall be, if they refuse to take the cup at your hand to drink, then you shall tell them, Yahweh of armies says, you shall surely drink. For behold, I begin to work evil at the city which is called by my name. And should you be utterly unpunished, you'll not be unpunished, for I'll call a sword on all the inhabitants of the earth, says Yahweh of armies. Comment in verse 28, the nations shall surely drink the cup of Yahweh's wrath. It won't be possible to refuse it or escape it. In verse 29, since the city called by Yahweh's name, which is Jerusalem, has to drink it, let not any nation think they can avoid it. If even Yahweh's beloved Jerusalem must drink it, he won't spare any nation. The nation that treads on Jerusalem, which will be all of them in the end times, Revelation 11:2, will surely not go unpunished. Yahweh will call a sword on all the inhabitants of the earth, verse 30. Therefore prophesy against them all these words, and tell them, Yahweh will roar from on high and utter his voice from his holy habitation. He'll mightily roar against his fold. He'll give a shout as those who tread grapes against all the inhabitants of the earth. A noise will come even to the end of the earth, for Yahweh has a controversy with the nations. He'll enter into judgment with all flesh. As for the wicked, he'll give them to the sword, says Yahweh. Comment in verses 30 and 31, Yahweh will tread all the nations. In verse 31, he has a controversy with them, a score to settle. In the process, he'll differentiate between individuals. His sword is for the wicked. Verse 32. Yahweh of armies says, behold, evil will go out from nation to nation, and a great storm will be raised up from the uttermost parts of the earth. The slain of Yahweh will be at that day from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. They won't be lamented, they won't be gathered or buried, they'll be dung on the surface of the ground. Comment, it's the great and terrible day of the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, Joel 2:31. Terrible for the wicked and great for his own. The scattering of the dead on the land with no one to bury them is reminiscent of what happened in Judah. Verse 34. Wail, you shepherds, and cry. Wallow in the dust, you leader of the flock, for the days of your slaughter and of your dispersions have fully come, and you'll fall like fine pottery. The shepherds will have no way to flee. The leader of the flock will have no escape. A voice of the cry of the shepherds and the wailing of the leader of the flock, for Yahweh destroys their pasture. The peaceful folds are brought to silence because of the fierce anger of Yahweh. He has left his covert as the lion, for their land has become an astonishment because of the fierceness of the oppression and because of his fierce anger. Comment in verses 34 to 38, still there's no distinguishing between Judah's astonishing destruction in Jeremiah's time and worldwide destruction in the end times, as the death and destruction in Judah was horrendous beyond imagination in 586. The worldwide destruction of the end times will be similarly astonishing and horrendous. Amos 5:18-20. In verses 34 to 36, the shepherds and leaders of the flock are the leaders of Judah and leaders of the world. Yahweh will target them particularly. There will be no escape. In verse 38, Yahweh has left his covert as the lion. Instead of covering Judah and the world with a dome of protection, he'll cover them all right, but it'll be as if a lion is on top of them. Jeremiah 26 is next.